Hello, hello, Cherry here, the other head of Hydra Game 69. And today I'm going to be taking over her podcast slash audio of reading of the Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes.
Okay, so let's begin where I think she left off. Hopefully it's the right spot. Charlie grabbed John's arm as they neared it, then let it go and straightened her back. She felt as though she were preparing for a fight, as if the building itself might attack if it sensed weakness. Charlie went warmly up the few steps to the door, sticking to the edge and testing the wood before she let down her full weight. The stairs held, but there were soft splinter patches in the middle she didn't want to try. John didn't follow her right away, sidetracking by something nearly hidden in the grass. Charlie, he held it up, a battered metal sign with the paint words Freddy's Family Diner in red script. Charlie gave a gentle smile. Of course, this is it. I'm home. John came up the stairs behind her and set the sign down carefully by the door, and they went inside. The door swung open easily. Light streamed in through the windows on all sides, revealing emptiness and decay. Unlike Freddy's, this place had been cleaned out. The wooden floors seemed intact, but they were warped from weather. Sunlight was streaming in, unobscured, and went where it wanted to, without furniture or people to block its path. Charlie looked up at the ceiling fan. It was still there, but one of its blades was missing. There were double doors to the right with circular windows, unlike the dining area, which was breached with sunlight and the sounds of the outside. The room behind the double doors was still pitch black. John was more interested in this than Charlie. Charlie and he carefully peered into one of the windows, obviously tempted to nudge it open and see what was inside. Charlie left him to his curiosity and walked further into the dining room, which she only knew as the dining room through memory. Now it was a vacant and lonely room, stretching along and narrow, at least 50 feet, growing darker as it went. There was a slightly elevated stage in the end of the room, and Charlie realized as she looked around that the place had probably once been a dance hall, and then the long desk by the entrance that her parents had used for a cash register had probably been a bar. She went over to it and saw that she was right. There was even grooves and stretches in the wood floors where bar stools had once dragged their feet. She tried to picture it in a dark bar with a country western band playing on the stage, but she could not. Charlie looked at the stage. She could still see two animatronic animals in shadow, moving in unnatural twists and turns. She could hear echoes of carnival music and distant laughter. She could still smell the cigarette smoke in the air. She hesitated before going further, as though the ghost she remembered might linger on the stage. She tried to catch a glimpse of John, where John was. He finally had the door to the kitchen half open and was sticking his head inside. Charlie turned her attention back to the stage and walked towards it across the cracking floor. Even the smallest sound was deafening, accompanied by faint whistles as the wind slipped through cracks in the windows and walls. Strips of wallpaper had peeled down and hung flat against the wall. And in turn, until a breeze lifted them up, and they wedged like thin fingers pointing at Charlie as she walked. Charlie stood at the base of the stage, studying the floor carefully for traces of might have stood there before. All that remained were holes where bolts had once been. The corners looked blackened with shapes of coils and wires etched into the dirty wood. Everything is gone. Her head jerked towards the corner to her right. There was another door. Of course there is another door. This is why you are here. She stood still, looking at that door, but not ready to touch it. She was grasping with a strange and illogical fear, as though spiders and boogeymen might come rushing out. The door was ajar. Charlie looked back towards John again, hesitant to go on without him. Although he heard her calling to him, he leaned out of the kitchen door with a wide-eyed expression. This is really creepy. He was obviously enjoying himself like a kid in a haunted house. Can you come with me? Charlie's plea came as a surprise to John, who seemed pleased but irritated at the same time, having been enjoying his own adventure on the other side of the building. 2 seconds, he promised, then disappeared again. She rolled her eyes, disappointed but not surprised that his childish curiosity would take priority. She rested the back of her head against the edged wooden door and gently guided it open, bracing herself against whatever might be inside. Whatever she had been expecting, this wasn't it. It was a closet. The side extending off her left, about 8 or 9 feet into darkness. There was horizontal poles mounted along the walls where hangers had once been. Square shapes imprinted in the dust filled her mind with images of boxes, maybe speakers. As she stepped inside, she pushed the door open all the way, trying to let in as much light as possible. As she walked further in, she let her hand drag along the wall. Although nothing was there now, she could feel heavy cloth, coats, and sweaters hanging. No, they were costumes. Costumes had hung here in the dark, hiding their collars but allowing themselves to be felt by every cheek and small hand that pressed through. Rubber-padded palms and fingers swayed this way and that. Reflections on a false eyes passed overhead. Charlie reached the end and turned to look back. She crouched down, looking up at the empty space. It didn't feel empty. She could still feel the costumes that were hanging all around her. There was someone else in the closet with her, kneeling down at her own height. It was her friend, that little boy. My little brother? They were both playing and hiding together as they always did. This time was different. The little boy looked up toward the door, stuttering as though they had been caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing. Charlie looked up as well. There was a figure in the door. It looked like one of those costumes was standing on its own, but it was motionless, so still that Charlie wasn't sure what she was seeing. It was the rabbit, the yellowish-brown rabbit they loved, but it did not dance or sing, just stood there and stared at them, unblinking. They began to squirm under its gaze, and the little boy screwed up its face to, well. Charlie pinched his arm, seized with an instinctually sense that they must not cry. The rabbit looked back and forth from one to the other, with those all too human eyes, penetrant as though weighing and measuring them in some way that Charlie could not understand, like it was making a momentary decision. Charlie could see it in its eyes, its human eyes, and she was cold with terror. She felt the fear in her brother as well, felt it echoing between them, reverberating and glowing because it was shared. They could not move, they could not scream. And finally the creature inside the patchwork, ragged yellow rabbit suit reached forward for the little boy. There was a moment, one singular moment, when the children still clung together, gripping hands, but the rabbit snatched the boy to his breast, yanking them apart, and fled. In that moment the entire memory shattered with piercing and unrelating screams, not her brother's, but her own. People rushed to help. Her father picked her up and held her, but nothing could console her. She screamed and screamed, louder and louder. Charlie snapped back from her dream, the sound still high and painfully in her ears. She was crouched down in silence. John stood at the door, not daring to interrupt. She did not remember much of what happened next. Everything was dark. It was all a blur of images and facts she had pieced together later, things she might remember and others she might have imagined. She was never in the restaurant again. She knew her parents shuttered the doors immediately. Then they moved to the new house, and Charlie's mother left a little while after that. Charlie did not remember her saying goodbye, although she knew her mother must have. Her mother would not have left without saying goodbye, but it was just lost in the mist of time and grief like so much else. She remembered the first time she stood in the doorway of her father's workshop, the first day they were alone in everything. It was the day he began to build her a mechanical toy. A little dog who tilted its head from side to side. She smiled when she saw it finished, and her father looked at her the way he would look at her for the rest of his life, as though he loved her more than life itself, as though his love made him unbearably sad. She knew even then that something vital inside him had broken, something that could never be repaired. Sometimes he seemed to look right through her, as if he couldn't see her even when she was standing right in front of him. Her father never again spoke her brother's name, and so Charlie learned not to speak it either, as though to speak it would send them back to the time and unravel them both. She woke in the morning and looked for the little boy, having forgotten in her dreams that he was gone. When she turned to where he would be and saw only her stuffed toys, she would cry, but she would not say his name. She was afraid to even think it, and she trained her mind to shrink from it until she truly forgot. But deep inside she knew it. Sammy. A rumbling sound rose loud and lower like a train passing, and Charlie startled. A train? She looked around her, her eyes widened. She was disoriented, not sure if she was in the past or present. It's okay, I don't think it's anywhere near here. Might just be a big truck. John took Charlie's arm and pulled her to her feet. Did you remember something? He whispered. He was trying to catch her gaze, but she was forced elsewhere. A lot. Charlie put her hand to her mouth, still staring into the darkness, as if she could see the scene. John's hand on her arm was another anchor. She clutched it fast to it. This is real. This is now, she thought, and she turned to him, seized by a fierce gratitude that he was there with her. She buried her face in his chest as if his body could shield her from what she had seen. and she let herself cry. John hugged her tight, one hand on her head, continuously stroking her hair. They stayed that way for a long moment, and at last she calmed, her breath deep and even again. John loosened his grip on her, and as soon as he did, Charlie stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been. John's hand was still suspended in mid-air from where Charlie had been. After a moment of shock, he lowered one and used the other to scratch his head. So, he hoped for an answer to fill the silence. A rabbit, Charlie said calmly, looking toward the doorway. A yellow rabbit. Her voice became grave as the image was still fresh in her mind. The one I saw the night Michael disappeared. The bear. I'm pretty sure he was yellow, too. I thought you said it was like the others, Charlie said. I thought it was. When everyone said Freddy was brown that night we first met up, I just thought I was remembering it wrong. I mean, I really didn't have a great memory for back then, you know? I didn't even remember what color my old house was, but then you said he was yellow, too. Yeah, they were yellow, she noted. It was the answer he was expecting. I think it's connected. The animals from here and the one I saw at Freddy's and the one that took my brother, Charlie thought. She took a final look around the place. Let's go back, she said. I want to get out of here. Okay, John said. As they headed to the door, a small object caught Charlie's eye, and she snatched it up. It was a twisted piece of metal, and as John watched, close by, she stretched it out and then let it snap back together with a loud crack, like a whip. John jumped. What was that? He said, composing himself. I'm not sure, she said, but she slipped it into her pocket. John was watching her like there was something he wanted to say. Let's go, Charlie said. They began the track back to the car. Sammy. Then years later, Michael and the other kids. Of course it's connected, Charlie thought. Lightning might strike twice, but not murder. Can you drive again? She asked after a long period of silence. The only sounds so far had been their shoes crunching through the dry grass. Yeah, of course, he said. And I'm going to end it there today. Until next time, talk to you later.